Hello, I'm Dahlia,
And I'm Allie.
and welcome to Navigate the Now.
Welcome. Today we have a very exciting guest on our first episode back in 2026.
Woo, woo, woo.
Today we have Pranoo Kumar, pronouns she, they, we, who is a proud immigrant, educator, TEDx speaker, and founder of Rohi's Readery, a social justice-driven children's bookstore and learning center located in the historic Northwest District of West Palm Beach, Florida. With a background in biology, medicine, and education, Pranoo brings over a decade of experience designing inclusive, identity-affirming learning environments across the country. From founding early childhood programs in Harlem and South Bronx to co-creating Washington State's first decolonized elementary charter, their work centers on culturally responsive literacy, equity, and healing-informed practice. As a former school leader, reading specialist, and founder of Diverse Education, her emphasized education consulting, Pranoo has led over 400 free literacy-focused events and built 200 plus community partnerships. I just want to say that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yes. Recognized as a 2-time New York Teacher of the Year and contributor to the Gates Foundation K-12 work, she continues to advocate for educational liberation through Rohi's Liberation Station, a critical literacy initiative focused on empowering marginalized communities through storytelling, education, and community connection. Welcome, Pranoo.
Welcome.
Yes.
To be here.
When do you have time to do anything? When do you have time to breathe? When you're over here changing the world?
Oh my gosh. I use lots of podcasts and apps around breathing strategies in the car.
Perfect.
Remind yourself to breathe.
That's right. That's
I
right.
just want to say, again, as an educator, that reading your bio brings me so much joy. This is amazing, and I'm so excited to hear from you. And this is what we need in this world.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. I appreciate all the work that you're doing. The
Thank
educator in
you.
me honors and sees the educator in you. So,
Thank you so much.
yeah. And before we get started, we do a few community agreements. And so what I'll do is I'll read through them and you let me know if you agree and if you'd like to add an additional agreement. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. So our first community agreement is that we speak in draft. It doesn't have to be a polished thought, or we can change what we say. We assume everyone is doing their best, and remember that we all, or most people, have good intentions. And we're not, number 3, we're not here to be right but get it right. Number 4, this is for us, but to be an active listener and be present. And also, again, for us, number 5, be mindful of speaking space and how much time we're taking up. But we're here to listen to you. And we choose to listen to understand versus listening to respond only solely. This is a space to grow, number 7. And number 8 is from the end of 2025 from our guest, Jenny. Don't yuck someone's yum.
Yeah.
And our last one, number 9, is have fun.
Yes.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes. So do you
have to have
agree?
fun. Yes.
Oh, yes, totally agree. I think the one other thing I was thinking about, which is kind of a culmination of it, but we say this as part of like our foundations of liberation with the Readery. We have like a set of 10 of them. One of them is be boundless and limitless.
Ooh.
So,
Ooh, I
yeah.
love it.
Yes.
So just thinking about this idea of learning and unlearning and how that's all part of the process. So, kind of in line with not here to be right, allowing your mind and even having the visual of being boundless and limitless in your ability to learn and unlearn.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really like that a lot because it ties in, we'll get into it about the Rohi's Reader and everything, but it's, I would say, like, to have that boundless and limitless mindset, reading is a way to be able to get to that spot. So I love it.
Mhm.
We're adding it on. I agree to it. Allie, do you agree to this agreement?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So Pranoo and I met, just to give the listeners a little background. I want to say it was in September. This was the second year that I went to what's called One Girl Women in Charge Summit. I'll link the information below. It's a great organization that really helps women just like in to go work towards leadership roles. And this year, well, actually, it was in 2025. Pranoo was one of the speakers. I didn't know that. When I arrived, I sat at the table and I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna sit in the front." And I was there patiently waiting, and then somebody sat next to me, and your energy, like, the way you laughed, the way how you just interacted with other people at the table, just like how you were listening, I was like, I love it. You didn't know this, but I was next to you and be like, "She is so cool.
Oh,
I really like her energy." And then lo and behold, they're like, Pranu coming up to be part of the speaker. I was like, "Okay, well, that makes sense."
oh,
Because the way how you were just I don't know, how you were just present and then your message that you gave, I was like, "Yeah, it makes sense, and I wanna talk to her." So I went up to you at the end, and I was like, "Hey, hi, my name is Dahlia. I'm doing this podcast, with my friend Allie. Would you be so generous to give your time and come on?" And you said, "Yeah," and here we are.
I
You
know.
are first guest of
Yeah.
2026.
I feel
Ah,
honored.
yeah. Um, and since then, I've been doing a little bit of research and seeing that you've had a TED Talk that we mentioned in your bio. Many people have interviewed you, and so people are really, like, love the work that you do. It really speaks to so many of us. What I wanna do is I wanna take some time to ask you to share the beginning of your story to what led you to where you're at today. So wherever that is, wherever that takes you, if that's from 10th grade or the age of or 10 years old, um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
the floor is yours to let us know where you wanna
Yeah.
start with your story.
No, well, thank you so much for your kind words. And it's so funny because that One Girl Summit, I was so excited. My dear friend Megan Barraquette is the founder of that summit. And actually, I was really excited in particular because one of our recent high school graduate interns, Eris, she actually was already sitting at that table. And I came in and I just thought, I'm a proud intern mama right now. Look at you in college and getting here 30 minutes early with a coffee all dressed up and ready to go front and center.
She
Um,
was on point. Her
and
outfit,
everything. I know
beautiful.
that is her
It's like
to a T. Yes. And she still works with us now as our learning architect. So now she oversees our interns.
Tell her
Um,
I say hi.
yeah, I will. So yeah, when I think about the Readery, I always obviously think first of my grandmother, Rohini, whom the Readery is named after. And then my older daughter is also named Rohini. So I have a 5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old named Romani, my
Aw.
little revolutionaries. But it really has been just born out of the work that those who have come before me have really created and instilled a strong foundation for. I didn't realize it at the time, but growing up, moving from India to the deep south, particularly Texas in the 80s, and what that impact had on me in terms of my feelings of self worth, identity, engagement with community, especially being an immigrant, especially with my family attempting to assimilate. And so it was this duality of, okay, I need to be the best immigrant, quote unquote, that I can be, while also not really understanding my identity. And I think that when you're young, and your family's doing the best that they can, but they're really trying to instill a sense of safety in your environment that you don't really realize until later the impact of certain actions that have had on your life. So for me, not seeing myself in curriculum in positive ways, not seeing myself in the books that I was reading, unless it was about Gandhi or British rule or, things of that nature. And also just observing at the time the way that my family was treated in educational spaces and professional spaces really did have an impact, and I didn't realize that until later when I began experiencing some pretty strong emotional and mental health challenges. And it was in college that and just as a trigger warning around just like suicide and mental health, but it was the first time that I attempted at suicide. And even then, though, I did not realize the impact of my work or of my experiences. So here I was in college, still trying to figure out a way, figuring out how to assimilate, figuring out how to engage, and knowing that that had happened to me. But because in our cultural space, you don't really talk about those things. And it's seen more of as this is something that can be fixed or you're okay, right? I never talked to my parents about it until I was in my mid 30s. And so when I was in college experiencing that, it really just made me feel as though I wasn't worthy of being in spaces unless I was trying to assimilate or change
Mm,
myself. And then I, finished college. I got my master's in medical sciences. I started med school and very quickly on was like, this is not the space for me once again. And went back home. It was quite hard. It was either you're a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, you figure it out. All of my cousins were in the field. And I just felt like this wasn't the place for me. And I always say that teaching changed my life. It saved my life because being in a space of the unknown, now having these degrees, couldn't use them for anything. And also now going into the nonprofit space, which is what I was doing, got laid off during the recession, moved to New York, was working 4 part-time jobs, all about who you know definitely over what you know, and applied to over 250 jobs in education, working with children, nonprofit work, you name it. I received a callback for a teaching fellowship and for career changers, and that is truly what changed my life. Teaching in the South Bronx, teaching in Harlem, still communicating to this day with my babies, but seeing how proud they were of their identity, culture, community, the sense of community driven work where everyone is taking care of each other in the neighborhood. And also just seeing my 4 and 5-year-olds being proud to be Dominicano or like Ghanaian or having me over for dinner, on a Sunday night after I had oral surgery, which is literally what happened once, and I had the best Dominican food. um, and those moments made me start to engage more in my identity, but still was having those experiences around my mental health and realized I was feeling burnt out. And so I moved to Seattle because my now husband and I were long distance for about 5 years. And then we moved to Seattle together. I helped open up the first elementary charter school in the state of Washington and was thrilled about it, thinking, okay, fresh start. I get to learn all these best practices from New York, but I also get to work with in a refugee community and really show what decolonizing curriculum and learning can look like, what it looks like to have community investment, because I was thinking about my parents not being included in many meetings in my school space and the impact that it has now on me and the way that I work with my children. Um, and actually, while I was there, ended up finding out that I was getting paid a third of my white counterparts. So there's so many different layers of complexity to this because in that thread is always thinking about my grandmother, being an education activist, being someone who fought for children's rights, being someone who fought for the emancipation of women's rights, especially women of color in colonized rule in India. When I was in Seattle, I realized that I was getting paid a third of my white counterparts, and there's this flow chart I'm not sure if you've seen it's called The Problem, quote unquote, of Women of Color in the Workforce. And it shows how you come in, you're celebrated, engaged, all the things. Then you start to engage in things that you're seeing, challenges, wanting to present with solutions, but you start to become seen as a problematic person and someone that's complaining or someone that's too angry until the point where you're pushed out, but you're pushed out essentially because you're made to think that you actually did it because you're exhausted, you're burnt out, you're tired of repeating yourself. And so that actually ended up happening to me. That's where the suicidal thoughts came back. Um, then we moved to Florida. We moved to Florida in 2019 to be closer to family. And during that time, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to take everything that I've learned and now be my own boss. I'm going to do DEI consulting, education consulting. I'm going to make sure I'm getting paid what I deserve, all the things. Still missing the classroom, but I ended up having a hard time because during this time, DEI, people wanted to pick and choose what they used. What do I say? Oh, you can't say this. Oh, can you take this out? And when you're in a space of authenticity and saying DEI and liberation and ancestry, and people are telling you to take that out, those feel like the fundamental core values. And I couldn't break away from that. But that was okay because COVID hit and I lost all my contracts. So back at square one. And that's where the readery really came is I was pregnant with my first child. Literally March 5th, I found out I was pregnant. And then March, I think it was like 6th, everything closed down. Was pregnant. And I had this big whiteboard. And I just thought, okay, what am I doing? Like, how do I, for the first time, I don't know who I am. I, in terms of like my profession, I felt like everything that I'd experienced in terms of my own personal identity, that's always been lost. But my professional space, I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I feel confident. But now I'm like, wait, what do I do? Who am I? And so that's where the readery really came into fruition was just how do I create something, start what I want, do what I want, teach what I want, and sort of carve a story out of all of these experiences that allows me to also build authentic connection with people because that was another thing. It was hard when I moved from place to place. So yeah, I know that was a long story about the readery, but getting to that place. But all of those pieces are so important to why I'm able to authentically share about how much I love about this space.
No, I think that's your story, right? And that's why you're here. So,
Yeah.
that is why you are where you are today, and I think that's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. As you were speaking, there was like this question that came to mind and that question that came to mind. What would you say that the readery is where it was a culmination of finding your identity as an individual and professionally as well?
Oh my gosh, yes. It
Mhm.
100% was. The readery, it's so interesting because everywhere that I moved from place to place was also looking for a safe space to go to where I felt mission and morally aligned, both personally and professionally. Because I think it's funny how people will say, don't bring your professionalism into your workspace into your personal and vice versa. But I always think most of the time, the reason why we're in the profession that we are in, or why we choose not to go into something, is because of a culmination of experiences that we've had growing up. So, like, how could it not feel personal, right? How could it not be so integral, your personal and professional in that way? But it's also the place and just being super vulnerable and honest where my ability to also engage with my mental health in a liberatory way and in a way where I was surrounded by other people that We're also people of the global majority. We're queer people, neurodivergent community, you name it, feeling empowered, take care of ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually, you name it. Because during both of my pregnancies, I experienced pre and postpartum and the suicidal ideation and everything. And it was throughout all of our free programming, especially for our adult programming around creative and healing writing, around our mindfulness by Black girls, all these different pieces where I started to also engage in starting to go to therapy, getting diagnosed with ADHD, understanding my superpowers, understanding where my unlearnings are coming from, understanding why I thought growing up and like failing in high school because it was so much information and comprehension, like the pace was so fast. Understanding why I was not thriving in that versus elementary and middle where it was just memorization and, you know, facts and learn this and you get this, learn this and get this. It was such a culmination of so many things and understanding more about who I was. And now being able to take that to understand my two little girls now too. Yeah.
It's also the understanding the identity of culture, but when you talk about neurodivergence and different styles of learning,
Right.
incorporating that, I mean, this is really a holistic approach to just become going back to what you mentioned, being boundless and limitless is like being able to understand your superpowers and unlearning the things that
Yes.
we have to unlearn, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that you said learning your superpowers because I think we spend so much of our life repressing who we are or these things that we don't like about ourselves. And then to me, it feels like for me, it was in my 30s. And I think that's a lot of, as women, a lot of women feel that way probably. But
Uh,
learning that what you've repressed is a part of your superpower, actually,
yeah.
at the end of the day. And it's kind of a fascinating realization. It's a little scary.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
No, even just saying that, I remember a teacher telling me they didn't think I was a great writer, and they said, "Oh, it must be because English is your second language." Yeah,
Yikes.
some of the comments that
Wow.
teachers had also said, like, "You're not smart, but you work hard, so that's what's getting you through this class." Like, just
Wow.
yeah, very interesting things. But I think about how, especially in the educational space, being able to see, especially as a writer, that my way of communicating has always been through storytelling
Hmm.
and how much that is a part of this space. And also opening space for our children to know when they say, I'm not a good writer, it's actually, no, you're a great writer. You are writing your story in different ways, whether it's
Mhm.
music, movement, you name it. But also, how are we expanding what that looks like for people to label and name who you are based off of a traditional archetype of what it is to be quote unquote a great writer, you
Yeah.
know? Because now I think about that person, that teacher that said that. And yeah, I may not be the research paper writer, but that's also not my journey and where I want to go. My journey is the art of storytelling in creative ways. And so I appreciate you saying that because people don't realize how the things that are said to you at a young age really can have such a lasting impression on who you see yourself as.
I wanna share a story with you, if that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
And I'm, like, getting emotional thinking about it because it is so true that,
Get
um
emotional.
ah! It's so
We love
true,
emotion.
uh, that because we spend a lot of time in education system and, my both my parents are immigrants.
Mhm.
I was in kindergarten when they told me that, I failed. And essentially, they told my parents, "We're gonna need to put her in" and I'm forgetting the term, but I had to redo kindergarten, but it was transitional 1st grade that they put me in.
Uh-huh.
And so that had a big impact on me that I wasn't able to move forward with my peers, with my friends.
Yeah.
And then in that class that I was in, it was definitely, folks who learned differently, but I excelled and I went on to 1st grade, and then they put me in with Miss Purcell. It was once a week gathering kids who essentially spoke a different language at home and,
Uh-huh.
like, taking them out and, like, "Okay, here's, like" I don't even understand the reason why we were all put together, but I all what I know, the one thing that we had in common, and I grew up in the Midwest, and it was a predominantly, like, white neighborhood,
Uh-huh.
um, and it feeling othered, and it just because of who was at the front of the school decided that this is how you should learn, right?
Right.
Because you come from a different background, because you speak a different language, maybe that's why you're not catching on or learning a certain way. And so that really had a huge impact on me, believing that I wasn't smart enough and I
Um,
wasn't deserving enough in certain ways. So there comes that whole like unlearning things. So it's super impactful to have spaces like yours that are telling 4 and 5-year-olds, these revolutionary readers that like you do belong and how you learn is your superpower and you will do great things.
mhm.
Yes.
And I also thank you for
Yes.
sharing that story, and I hope that
Yes.
teacher, principal, school knows that being a multilingual learner, actually, your brain is moving and
Mhm.
and
Mhm, mhm.
flexible and doing all the things,
Yeah,
at a
absolutely.
much faster rate than someone who can only speak English, so,
Exactly,
just
exactly.
sharing that. No,
There's
but
a
that's
great book that addresses that called I think it's called Cultural Competency, and it's, like, learning
yes.
how to identify cultural competency in our students and what that strength means in ways that often people an educator might not see or somebody else. And it's also really not considered great practice anymore, I know, to hold a kindergartner back. I just wanna say that
Yes,
as
Yeah,
well.
well,
Like, I know
well,
it's
thank God.
it's
agree.
considered just like yeah, not
Mhm.
ideal at all. And I wanted to say, just chime in, which goes back to which you were involved in DEI and you expressed your experience with that, but that's why it's so important, right? Because we need
Yeah.
people leading that have that different perspective than just the same people overseeing
Mhm.
things that don't understand what, whether it be a principal at a school doesn't understand the experience of their students. But
Right.
Dahlia, for instance, you've had that experience or Pranu you as well. And so, it lends itself to
Mhm.
serving people in a different and more equitable seen
Yeah.
way, you know?
Yeah, it's something where I think about even just having that type of training around reframing your messaging, right? So even if you are pulling a small group around multi-language learners, like oftentimes it's seen as I'm pulling a group for X, Y, and Z instead of, all right, my superhero multilingual learners, like we're going to go and, even just like reframing the way in which we're communicating that as a superpower and the gifts of our children, it has such an impact. And obviously, studies show that inclusive settings are the best way to learn because children are learning from each other and from lived experiences. But I also think that we, as a educational community, have such a long way to go in terms of culturally responsive practices and also even just being able to do it because right now it's all being pulled. You can't even say certain words within, especially in Florida, within in our school spaces.
No, it's a mess.
Yes.
And and it's becoming unfortunately it feels like it's becoming messier and more aggressive and more I'll say violent even by the
Mhm.
day. It's like, Moms for Liberty, born out of Florida. Um,
Right.
and
right?
they're creating a playbook of how to take over school districts. It's happening where my husband's teaching right now. It's literally in they are following the playbook, and it is working, um, here in Ohio.
And that's very similar here, and I think that's why we have to get creative in the ways in which we are educating our children and engaging with them. So, I can go to every single public comment hearing for the school district and I can advocate, but I also know that if I am here, I'm able to engage with our neighborhood and our community of learners in a tangible way and in a way that doesn't allow for red tape or paperwork or all the messy things that are intentionally created to keep quality content and learning out of our kids' hands. If I can choose instead to be in this space and coalition build. And so someone who may not be an educator who has worked with phonics and all the things, I stay here. You're actually the one going to the public hearing meeting and using your gifts. I think we all just have to start to think creatively about how are we going to still get the content and the learning and the empathy building and the um, social emotional learning, all of those things to our children in a way that we're all sort of like doing our part. Because uh, I think if we put all of our efforts and energy in one specific way, it just is not going to happen in at the rate that we want it to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I do wanna talk a little bit about the community that you're located in. Tell us a little bit about why this particular community? Why this particular space?
Yeah, so we were originally in downtown West Palm at a location called City Place. And we were there, what was supposed to be a 6-month pop up turned into 3.5 years of being there. But
Oh.
then an RFP went out by the city of West Palm to purchase a property in the historic Northwest, which is literally minutes from our old location. It's a historically Black community, once known as Black Wall Street of America. So much history, roots, ties. The Sunset Lounge is here, and that was part of the Chitlin Circuit and Green Book, along with the Hampton House in Miami, where MLK wrote a speech and Muhammad Ali and Ella Fitzgerald and all used to go and stay. But the Sunset Lounge is here, where Lena Horne, Louis Armstrong, all of the greats played. And the community that I am so honored and feel so grateful to be in, we ended up winning the bid to purchase the property. It was like Shark Tank style. It was like all these different businesses, but what I loved was that it was a call to minority and or women-owned businesses. So on our strip is all Black-owned businesses,
Oh,
which
wow.
is amazing. And so opportunity to purchase the property, and it's so wild because I have a text thread with one of my dearest friends who is also one of our board members on our nonprofit. And uh, in 2022, I messaged her saying, I dream of a craftsman home where there's like a barbecue, a garden, there's like outdoor space for kids to hang out and things. And the space that we are in, it's a two-building property, but the front building, which I'm currently in, is like a craftsman home. It's so wild, yeah. I, like, wanna frame that little text thread. It's like this little text thread, and what's crazy is that this person that I sent it to, she actually came the very first day of the Readery ever being open, and her daughter, who just graduated now from college, and her husband, and they've now become, like, basically family and aunties to and uncle to my 2 little girls, but they live down the street from us now. It's just so crazy
Aw.
how chosen family has come through this,
Cool. I love
but the
that.
Yeah.
but yeah, but the historic Northwest is just it's so rich in Black history, culture, community, um connection,
Mhm.
and, you know, was when you talk to the elders here, they talk about how much they loved growing up here, how it was thriving Black businesses, restaurants, grocery stores, and then the crack epidemic hit in the 80s. And the community just became so under-resourced that it's just when I talk to the elders, it's so interesting because now our neighborhood has one of the lowest life expectancy rates. The closest grocery store is driving distance or you have to pay for parking, and it's essentially a food desert. Even just like the pantry next door is the food isn't nutritious. And so you're seeing that. And then you're seeing the gentrification and the housing market coupled with that. Um, but you see this sense of protection and identity with our elders that are teaching our youth. So, like, our garden is named the Elizabeth Munnings Garden, which is named after a living legend. She's 96, Munnings, who was able to ensure that this community was named a historic landmark because of its contributions. What people also a lot of people don't know is that a man by the name of Cracker Johnson, a Black man, was one of the first millionaires in the early 1900s, like, during the Great Depression, and he actually pulled the city of West Palm Beach out of bankruptcy during that time. So there's all of these stories and pieces of information that we are trying to share with our kids in the community so they know the power of their history. They know the power of their community despite the, unfortunately, intentional systems that have been put in place to oppress, such as gun violence, food insecurity, housing, you name it, that they still have the power because they're seeing their elders doing it right now too.
That's really powerful to have the elders in the community teaching the younger folk, like,
Mhm.
eh, you just can't like, that's priceless right there.
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of knowledge that you can't buy anywhere, you know?
I mean, we have a program called Bridging Revolutionaries where it's
Mhm.
our elders teaching, but then our youth teaching our elders too, so that they're able to, so there's just always that multi-generational experience. And those are some of my favorite moments, like the storytelling piece and seeing how our youth are oftentimes labeled as, oh, they don't want to listen to their grown-ups, they don't want to listen to the elders. No, it's just if you position them in a place of leadership and you
Yeah.
show them that they are like worthy of that knowledge, but also worthy of sharing their own experiences. Once again, it's all about just like how are we reframing the way in which people are interacting so that they feel empowered and it doesn't feel like a power dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's teaching that you have value as you show up, right?
Mhm,
Today, not
exactly.
not later after you're here because you're
Yeah.
here.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
The way that you're leading in this community, was it just serendipitous that you landed where you're at? Or was it, like, specific where this is where I wanna move to when I move to Florida? Or
Oh, this is I it being in the historic Northwest, I this is exactly the community that I've always wanted to be. It reminds me so much of Harlem, of the Bronx, of Tukwila. It is so rooted in history and community and identity. It's also a space where, like, I'll give you an example. Someone once asked me, "Oh, Pranoo, are you nervous to be in, a different community in terms of safety and all the things? Because you were in like an outdoor mall essentially and all of that." And while I'm so grateful for the first 3 years and having built, our free educational programming and accessibility to Pride Family Fest and all these things. Was it fully serving the mission of what I've always wanted a space like this to serve? Not fully, but also when people would say that, Um, I would tell them, "I feel so loved
Hmm.
and protected here in our community." I literally feel like there is an invisible barrier, like a shield of love around this space because of how much the kids love this space, of how we love engaging with the adults, and also like the work that's being done. And it's funny, well, not funny, but it's interesting because when I was in that space before, I had received, death threats and had
Oh,
my space vandalized
Wow.
and an in-person shooting threat, all the things, right? And then being here, I have not experienced one thing except for a tremendous amount of love and the
mm,
way in which, like, the little moments, right? We have a basketball hoop in our back of our space, and sometimes the basketballs are left out, and someone had once said, "Oh, don't you think you should bring the basketball hoop in and the basketballs and stuff?" And I said,
Yeah.
"Listen, you have to show and trust your community, and when you show that, like, they do you're trying to build their trust, you know?"
Mhm.
And so coming
Mhm.
into this space, it was, "I want to build your trust, but I also want you to know that I engage and I trust you as
Mhm.
well." And that has been like a little bit of like a mind shift for some of our people who may have visited the other location and now
Mhm.
are also learning and unlearning too, because it's a lot easier to be progressive in a safe white affluent space
mhm, right.
Mhm.
than
Mhm.
actually, you know being boots on the ground, engaged, and willing to be maybe the only white person in an entire Black community too. Uh,
Mhm.
so yeah, it's been a really beautiful journey, and I feel so loved and welcomed and valued in our neighborhood.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It takes a it's a give and take there, right? And so I'm sure
Mhm.
it took some time to get to where you're at. So you went from experiencing vandalism and threats at the old space that you were at, that was like an outdoor mall type of, and
Yeah,
then moving into your current place where it's a, was it like a freestanding?
it's like a two building property that has like a courtyard in the front and the back.
Mhm.
Mm.
And may I ask, the threats that you were getting, what was it, what do you feel like it was attacking?
I think it was attacking. Well, I know it was attacking anything that was different from what the person was sharing. So, and essentially what they're afraid of. So, a lot of it was around LGBTQ rights, around trans rights, around Black history, around advocating for talking about truthful history, around um, different family units, all types
Mm.
of things. Anything that had the words diversity, anything about inclusion, anything about just allowing a child and a family, adult, you name it, to just be their most authentic selves. Um, we got a lot of pushback and threats around that. So, and it was also emboldened by our government, right? Our like Florida governor and politicians were also, when you see people that are in positions of power being so bold to talk about things. I mean, even drag story times. Like, come on,
Mhm.
that's a whole nother thing. But that was also one of our biggest. Uh, we had to come up with like a safety plan and all of that just for that too. So yeah,
I was gonna say in education, there was definitely I now am in higher education and teaching in college, but prior after I was there in 2016 and teaching, and I was at a progressive school, just
Mhm.
to give and we were going through it. I mean, people were looking up our voting records, people were trying to record us. And when you spoke specifically about the family unit, I was doing administration for a little bit, and it was like any little thing that somebody could hang on, like, one parent brought in a book and wanted to share about having two moms, and that became this huge thing. And I just felt like pre 2016, if I was honest, I don't think it would have, I don't remember it causing, I just don't remember just this
Right.
animosity and having to pick apart every single thing so
Right.
much, and it kind of starts to make you feel crazy. Or for instance, I teach Spanish and I had students look, at when Hispanic Heritage Month arrives each September 15th, Google did a gallery for a long time, these art galleries that you could go in and look through, and they were interesting. And one year I had an LGBTQ section on it, and I let students go through and look at it. And mind you, I've done private, or I mean public and private. So this was private and this was progressive. So my I wasn't under like as much scrutiny,
Yeah.
let's say, as when teach. Anyways, I was accused because a student who had been, I think, homeschooled, brought from Texas,
Oh,
you name it. Yeah. They
yeah.
obviously were very curious. And so I got a phone call at the end of that day that the parent had called the office and claimed that I had put gay porn
Oh my
on their
gosh.
device. I'm not even kidding. So I use that to give you an example of like just how I feel like how ready people are to
Oh, yeah.
put you in
To
the guillotine.
hear.
And it's all this rhetoric coming that I'm like, this has never existed before. And luckily I'd been around long enough that I like stood tall through it. I was kind of
Right.
like, no, I know what I'm doing.
I honestly,
But
have also been so, um in very much underwater with similar situations. The books that we have out and the covers that are shown, and what am I presenting? What am I indoctrinating? What am I trying to promote? Um, and I always just go back to empathy, being a kind human, learning the story of another. And it's interesting how people sort of they think you're going to give them this elaborate research based, like, and yeah, a lot of it is based in research, but it's also be a kind human. Be a kind human, and also raise our children to be kind humans. That's what we're trying to do. And that's oftentimes through stories, you know?
yeah,
And so yeah, that has been a big thing for us in this space in particular. Also, like, being in a historically Black community, we did our Pride Family Fest here for the first time, and I was also trying to really be conscious and navigate ensuring, prior, most of our Pride events and our Pride, and just like historically, even just in Palm Beach County, are predominantly white. And our event, you know, uh, being in a Black community and being culturally responsive and thinking about how to be intentional, making sure that all of our workshop leads and our story times, all these things were people of color too, that were part of the LGBTQ community. And we ended up having at the end of the day a drag story time. And some of our kids were like, I've never seen this. I don't know this. Because a lot of our kids, they come by foot, they walk here. It's a very walkable community. And it's also, in terms of just the kids are always just, most of the caregivers I have never met. Um, but it was interesting because we had like one particular family that comes all the time, and one of the kids was like, "I don't know what this is," was like, kind of hesitant. And so we honestly, we honored the initial reaction and honesty because you don't know what you don't know. And so we sat outside and we talked about what this actually means and what drag story times that is and drag queens and talking about the things. And the whole family stayed the entire time. And one of the kids was like, "Can I get a picture with you? Because you look like a princess." And it's even just those moments of our kids, they're curious. We also tend to say, if they don't know something, it's like, "How do you not know that?" Or like, "What?" Instead of coming from curiosity. And when we're boundless and limitless and we hold space for that too, yes, it could go either way, but at least you're holding space for the potential of it being serving and
yeah.
empowering as an empowering moment.
I think that's so
Mhm.
important to really hold it like that, to be curious versus like, I can't believe you don't know that, like, you've been living under a rock type of thing, because then it will just put people off and shut people down.
Right.
So
Agreed.
you you did a TED Talk,
Mm.
and at the beginning of the TED Talk, I can't remember word by word, hopefully you can help me with this,
Yeah.
but you had a window, and then you
Yeah.
had a mirror.
Yes.
Can you explain to our listeners what was
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So we have a song that we say, "We read something, we learn something, we share it with the world. Let's go. We read something, we learn something, we share it with the world." And what that really means is that we're providing windows and mirrors of learning. So, window is being able to see into the world and story of another. A mirror is feeling empowered in your own identity, seeing yourself in a book, advertisement, you name it, and the impact that both of those can have. And then we also say sliding glass doors. So being able to kind of experience both is, and that's oftentimes what we do also end up seeing. But it's this idea based on the statistic that a child who sees themselves and feels engaged in a story at a very early age is 500% more likely to stay engaged as a reader. When people say being seen, valued, and loved is close to the words of saying, I love you, that to the average person, it's almost indistinguishable. So just the windows and mirrors of ensuring that our children feel a sense of belonging and what that can have on their level of anxiety, depression, self-worth, and ability to engage as conscious citizens for the future too. Yeah.
Thank
I
you. I
yeah.
really I really I really like that a lot. It was like it gave such a clear imagery for me to be
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, this is what reading books all about."
So great.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Allie, do you have any questions or any comments?
No, I keep thinking when you do both have shared your stories though of education and me as a white person, it's a great juxtaposition because I was pushed up a grade actually to 1st grade and I was in a Montessori school and I was embraced, right? So like thinking, exactly, how does that set somebody up? And so hearing, especially Dahlia, you tell me the exact opposite and you're so young and you're so impressionable. What does that do
Mm,
to us, you know?
yeah. Yeah.
And so what that means to have which that's what I wanna hear a little bit more about, the diverse hearse
Yeah. Yeah.
your because I think those are really important, and why it's so important to mirror your population, especially, like, in education to have students, like you said it is, it's so important not students, but, people that resemble the people that they're teaching, and, like, I love how you said you focused on bringing people of color in to share those stories because that is why it's so important for our
Mhm.
children to have those role models as well. But I just kept thinking about, yeah, look at my experience. Look at the this is exactly what we're talking about,
Right.
and why it's so important.
Right. And the goal hope is that by us talking about these things, we're also positioning our caregivers that come after us that or those who have been exposed to similar oppressive systems know that this is not the norm and
Mhm,
that and hopefully have tidbits of like how to advocate
mhm,
or have a coalition of people who are saying,
mhm,
this isn't the way that I should be experiencing as a caregiver communication with my kid's school. This is not the way that my child
mhm.
should be treated behavioral wise at my kid's school. Even in those spaces, being able to acknowledge the past maybe mistrust of our communities, especially communities of color, and what does it look like to take these stories and let people know that they're not alone in their own experiences in the way that they're navigating now maybe their child's school.
So there's one thing that I did wanna touch base on
Yeah.
that I do remember you mentioning when you were the speaker at the conference, and that's asking the questions like, "Whose story is missing here?"
Mm,
Can you speak a little bit more about that question? Like, when we ask whose story is missing here, what does that mean, and what should we be looking for?
yeah, being able to first understand the definition of marginalized communities Um, and it goes beyond, your skin tone, things of that nature, right? Understanding refugee community, the disability community, neurodivergent community. There's so many communities and intersectionalities. And so the more that we can first learn and understand people's stories and where their points and experiences of oppression have been, will then also lend ourselves to understanding more when we don't see that in the room. So when you're sitting at a table and you're in a meeting, for whatever it is, I like to scan the room to see, one, like, do I know someone? Do I know their story, their intersectionality, whatever? Because there's also, like, for example, invisible disabilities, right? And all the things. But I also like to make sure that if we're in spaces that are really talking about community advocacy liberation and we don't know each other or we haven't had an opportunity to engage beyond maybe a networking experience, that in those types of spaces that we're also taking intentional time to learn at least one piece of information about someone's story that will allow us to build a deeper connection and a deeper understanding not only of who they are, but also maybe something that we didn't even have any idea or have access to knowledge about. Whether it is you were a refugee of another country or that you have experienced infertility, all of these different pieces are so instrumental to the way that we show up in the world. We oftentimes get told to be self-aware, but just as much as we're self-aware, we also need to be selfless in the way in which we're showing up to learn about others. So I think that is one of the biggest things for me is like how in spaces of heightened emotion, differences, all the things. Because I'll say when I go into a predominantly white space in a predominantly white meeting, I'm using now my toolkit on how to engage in that and how to prepare myself before entering those spaces. But if I don't know about that space and I walk into it, what am I doing to make sure that I am not going completely into defensive mode or into a space of I'm going to put my guard up because of my own experiences, because I don't want to use my own experiences as a form of self-victimization either. I want to use my experiences to build safety for each other. Yeah.
Well, you have your toolbox. We talk about toolboxes on
Mhm.
our podcast. What other tools for the toolbox that you would give? You gave a great one right now. Like not only being self-aware, but also being selfless and like looking around the room and taking time to learn something about somebody else, right? Feel free to add something else to the toolbox for the listeners.
Our team and I have been going through different workshops on different things that I've seen, at least in our environment, arising, and that how do I engage in healthy conflict, how to move and move through anxiety and stress, and also um, what like healthy communication can lead to. In those different things, we've, like, taken, like, a tidbit here and there, and for when we're talking about healthy conflict, we've talked a lot about what does it look like to come from a place of curiosity, and in that same thread, what does it look like to see different points of views or ways that we engage in our work in different ways uh, as data points of information to understanding more of who we are. And that's from the basics of like learning about your story, learning about who you are, right? And why you may, go on the defensive mode immediately, or why you may say, this is the only way, and maybe it's because you grew up in the role of being the caretaker and you had to make the decision fast, or maybe you were the peacemaker, so you're the one that's like, well, you're telling me this and then you're telling another team member this kind of thing. Well, maybe that's been your role growing up. Like, so we talk about in the ways of understanding a healthy conflict, using it as, instead of pitting against each other, using it as data points of information to understand more deeply who we are and why we function the way we do, but also how we are actually not meant to just live in one role. Like, we're multidimensional humans, but that takes time to put yourself out of that role that maybe you've served your whole life. And then with stress and anxiety, especially with the heaviness of our work, we've been talking a lot about two things. What does it mean to name it in your environment? Because when you name it, then your silence is not controlling the room. Because when people are oftentimes silent about the stress and feelings, it shows up in the body, and it also shows up just in your energy and the way you engage with another. So, how are we creating healthy, safe environments within our work? Because we're really about radical love and radical connection. To name, I am feeling overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. Great. I have a toolkit. Go step out, take a walk around the neighborhood, walk with one of our 2-year-olds because they have the funniest things to say, right? Things like that, but also, what does it look like to be able to name it, to understand that these, once again, are not seen in a negative way. Anxiety, stress, like, these are parts of who we are. These are feelings, emotions. But what can we do to use that again as data points of information to build better habits? So when we say, instead of ruminating and thinking about what happened and then going into self-negative talk, then go into worst case scenario, then it manifests in the body, and then you're just like, I'm going to quit. Instead of going to that place, gently process, get your butterflies in formation, which I heard from a master class, which I loved. It wasn't like, "Don't have butterflies, just get them in formation." Um, but instead reflect. So, ruminating is just dwelling on the what, whereas reflection is thinking about why it happened, and then even just having little lagging points of, okay, I'm going to attempt at this one little habit to build a better practice after reflecting on the why of this. That's been another thing that we've talked about, like ruminating versus reflection, and how, if we're really thinking deeply about it, reflection can lead to some of the best, if we know the steps to it, how it can lead to the most productive growth. So, those are some of the things that we've been talking a lot about.
Thanks for walking me through that. I love to ruminate.
Yeah.
I felt like you're speaking directly to my process. I was like,
Oh
"Oh,
my
she
gosh.
already kn
No.
she already knows me."
Oh
Uh,
my gosh, are you kidding me? That was literally me, like, a couple of months ago, with a situation, and I ran myself so deep into a hole and into the ground of, like, emotion and stuckness, and my high school interns were seeing our staff, and they were trying to be so supportive, but I was just, like, putting myself down so much, and then there's an app called Waking Up, that I listen to for, meditation in the morning, but they also have these podcasts, and there was one in particular about resolving conflict. It was like an 8-part thing, and I was like, "You know what? I need to shift. This is not serving me or anybody, and I really don't want other people to also develop negative ideas of the people involved in this." And so I listened to this 8 series podcast, and it taught me so much about, just the way that we can use mental health and mindfulness in approaching conflict that still allows us to preserve our identity and our self-worth and also hold on to our morals and values.
I'm gonna need to listen to that, so
It's so
Yeah, I wrote it down. I wrote
yes,
it down for
so
for us and the
excited.
listeners.
So
And
good.
I think it's important what you keep mentioning is conflict. And for me, this is me deconstructing and especially in the white world we live in, right? Conflict is so I come from waspy or I don't know or white, my I've talked about this before in another episode. I came from family who are Mennonite, which is like
Mhm.
and it's
Yeah,
very non-confrontational. So it's almost like to the extreme. We're just extreme pacifists, or was kind of how I was raised
yeah.
on one side, and then the opposite on the other. So it's anyways, but I've always been kind of raised to think for a long time that conflict was bad and that
Mhm.
any and I'm still kind of I feel like I'm trying to piece that out, but in my world, like they say when you go back with your family, you're like, "Oh,
Y
here we go again."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um and everybody I feel like sometimes I'm in this world of, like, everyone still thinks conflict is really bad, and it's so shameful when it's not,
Mm,
and learning that, like, it's okay to have conflict, and then how do we repair that afterwards? Because that's the most
right.
important part, and, like, and trying to work through that and just naming that as, kind of a function of some call it the colonial structure, the system of white supremacy,
Yes,
that incurs a lot of shame and guilt,
yes,
and a lack of repair. Um,
yes. And that
so
was one of the things in the podcast it said I'm so excited for y'all to listen. It's like an 8 or 9 part thing, on the app, and they said, we're taught so many skills growing up around, time management, critical thinking, all these different things, and we're shown creative ways to engage with that, but no one has ever really taught us how to be creative in our conflict, and I was like, "That is so
yeah,
true."
that's so
It's
yeah,
usually
good.
very
yeah,
Creative in the conflict, yes.
creative
yeah,
conflict, like,
Mm.
usually it's so binary and, like, right or wrong, but what if you could live in a space uh, of also I mean, obviously, there are certain things that's, like, humanitarian, what very right and wrong,
yeah,
but what if you could live in a space of, uh, being as creative in the way that you engage with conflict as you do on, a challenge that you're facing with programmatic instruction, right? You're seeing it as a uh, a data point of, "Okay, let's come together with a strategic plan," versus seeing it as a bad thing that just needs to be sort
yeah.
of wiped away kind of thing.
Shameful.
Shameful, exactly.
So many good tips. Yeah, taking it definitely adding it to my toolbox.
Ah, yay!
And I
Think
just
Go
no, go
ahead,
ahead,
Allie.
Dahlia. Sorry. I was just gonna say, I wanna thank you. I wanted to say this at the beginning, thanking you, but also I want to mention so often as somebody in education, that's why I'm so excited you're here. Um, because, there is as we've talked through and as we've seen, I mean, your story of how you got into education is so rare. It's rare that people say, "I went from this, these kind of what we consider these high and mighty professions, and then I chose education because I believe in
Mm,
it so much," right? Um, that is not the narrative or the discourse around education right now. It's like everyone's fleeing education and they're trying to get out as much as possible, and it's just this profession that's lost its the respect of it or the sanctity of it a little bit. I
yeah,
think people
yeah.
feel that way, and so it really touches my heart to hear
Yeah.
that you left that behind and you are embracing this now, and because that's
Thank
so not what
you.
we hear out there. And yeah, I just want to mention that and get that out there, that I really honor and respect that, and it's so rare right now to see people who really still are just taking it and going with it. It's like we're all fleeing instead of running towards. It's kinda how it
Mhm.
feels right now.
And
Ah,
it's more important now
Yeah.
than ever, right, to have
Yes.
strong educators supporting our future leaders.
yeah.
So,
you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
As I knew it would be, and it was just a pleasure and honor to have you on, and to share your story, and can't wait to share it with others. And I hope we'll stay in contact.
We will.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, would love to see the space whenever I'm in
Yeah, I gotta
Florida. Yeah.
visit.
Yeah.
yes, please do come see the space, and I can also I can send you some photos of our space.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah, please do. Please
Yes,
do.
please do.
Yeah.
I will.
All right.
And where can anybody who's listened, where can they find you?
Oh, yes. You can find us at www.rohisreadery.com. You can find us on Instagram at Rohi's Readery. And then if you're in the area, our address is 630 7th Street, West Palm Beach, Florida, 33401. And make sure you
Mhm.
put the address in with the full West Palm Beach 33401 because it'll either take you to our old location or there's a location 630 7th Street in Riviera Beach. So
Oh, okay.
just write the whole thing.
There we go. We'll make sure to have that distinction.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that.
All right, listeners, thank you so much. Thank you all for listening in. Thank you, Pranoo, for your time, and we'll keep in touch till next time.
Thank you.